Hi everybody, and welcome to the Stamperia Vintage Library Mini Album Tutorial Series designed for Scrap and Create. So this is the first build in the series, and all of the products that I will be using for the album will be listed in the description box below if they are available on the Scrap and Create website. And then there is a list of all the other products that I'll be using if you want to join me in the tutorial series. So for today, we're going to begin building the base pages for the album. I'm using Kraft cardstock to do this. You can choose to use a different color if you prefer. And this is going to be a slightly different type of page than what I usually do. So if you followed some of my other tutorials, we're not going to be making pocket pages in this album. We're going to do something a little bit different. So I have my pieces cut. I'm going to show you the measurements, show you the score lines, and then we'll start to do some stuff with these pages. So for my first 4 pieces that I need to cut this to 6 3/4 by 8 1/4. Then on the left-hand side, you need to score at 1/2 of an inch. So this is going to be page 1 front, page 2 front, page 3 front, and page 4 front. Now with each of my pieces, I'm going to fold on that score line, and I'm going to burnish these folds with my bone folder. If you are new to making mini albums, you want to make sure that you get a bone folder and you crease all of your score lines really well. This is what will help your mini album pages to lay flat. Your flaps will lay flat, your pockets will lay flat. But if you don't burnish this very well, it tends to kind of bubble up a little bit and not lay as flat. So burnishing is a really helpful way to make sure that everything lays nice and flat. And it's also really good for when you are adhering your papers down so that they aren't bubbled at all, and it spreads the glue pretty evenly underneath too. So now we have our 4-page fronts. We're going to next cut 4 pieces to 6 1/4 by 8 1/4. And that's all we're going to do with these ones. So then we're going to mark this one, page 1 back, page 2 back, page 3 back, and page 4 back. Now what's going to happen with these pages, so you get an idea about what's to come, we're going to place this tab on our hinge, and how we would normally have a backside, we will still have a backside, but it's not going to be glued together. It's going to open like this, and I'm going to place ribbons here to tie these pages closed, but then they will open so that there's room for photo spreads or some decorative elements inside of here. So it'll be very similar, but it won't have that pocket, so there won't be a pull-out photo mat. It'll actually have more space because you have 2 sides of the page here on the inside to work with. So we're not going to be adhering these together. We're going to leave them loose, and we're going to decorate each one individually as well as the insides. Once we have these finished, we will actually start to put these in the album. So I'm going to go ahead and start to build up some of these pages. We are going to start with the front of page 1 with 1 piece of cardstock that measures 7 1/4 by 4 3/4. And I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch on both sides. And then I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch on the bottom. And then I'm going to take my scissors and cut through those corners. Hopefully you can see that. That just takes that bulk out of that corner so that when I fold this, into a pocket, it will lay flat. So now that I have those pieces cut, I'm going to then go ahead and fold on my score lines, and I'm going to burnish this so that it will lay flat. And I like to burnish on both sides just so that it is as flat as possible. So now we have our pocket that will now be the same size as the front of the page. Next, I've taken some of those pieces that were remaining from the cuts off of the base pages that we bailed. Next, I've taken some of the remaining pieces that were left over from the base pages. These are 4 1/4 inches. They were 8 1/2 inches long. I've trimmed them to 4 1/4 by 4 3/4. I have 4 of them. I'm going to take these on the 4 3/4 inch side, score at 1/2 inch. I'm going to do this on all 4 pieces, and we're going to be creating flaps to make a waterfall, and this waterfall will hold 4 1/4 inch photos. Once these are scored, we're going to go ahead and fold on the score lines and burnish with our bone folder. Next, I have my pocket piece here with the opening at the top. I'm going to use my ruler to measure the center of this to place my flaps. Now, I use a centering ruler whenever I build my mini albums, so it's really easy. I just line this up, find the center, and measure over 2 1/8 of an inch, and I've placed a line because my flaps are 4 1/4. If you are not using a centering ruler, you need to measure over 1 inch from each edge and place a mark. That will put yours where you're going to be putting these here. So I'm going to be adhering my pieces down to my pocket one at a time. So just starting with the first piece, I'm going to take my adhesive. I like to use tacky glue. You can use whatever you prefer. Taking that first piece and placing that score line right at the edge of that pocket, line that up, and then use your bone folder to burnish this down. Once the first flap is on, go ahead and open it up. Take your second flap, add your adhesive to that 1/2 inch tab on the back of this one. And now we're going to line this score line up with that edge so that there's that 1/2 inch space between them. It will stick over the edge of the paper, and that's okay. You want to make sure you close both flaps so that they are straight this way too. That way, if they are not straight, you can slightly move it before this is adhered to your page. Once it's where you want it to be, go ahead and burnish that down. Now we're going to take our third flap, add our adhesive to this 1/2 inch tab section on it, and then we're going to place the score line straight with that 1/2 inch tab section. So there is that 1/2 inch between them, and then close your flaps, make sure everything is lined up, and then burnish this down. And then we are going to do the same thing with the fourth flap. So placing our adhesive here on this 1/2 inch tab. Lining the score line up with the bottom edge of the 1/2 inch tab, closing the flaps so that you can line them up straight. And then adhere this down. Next, I have the base of my page. I have my tab over here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to mark the center of my page here. So I'm going to mark this at, for me, it's 2 1/8 because I'm using my centering ruler. And if you are just using a regular ruler, measure up from the bottom 2 inches and down from the top 2 inches. Place your line, and we're going to do the same thing over here on this side too. Then we're going to take our piece and we're going to adhere this to the center of our page. So I'm going to add my adhesive on my tabs around my pocket first. Then I'm going to line up my pocket between those 2 marks and making sure that my score lines are straight up and down the page. Then I'm going to burnish this on all 3 of these pieces to adhere my pocket and my waterfall to the page. So now I have my waterfall and my pocket, and next we're going to build a closure. The first piece we need is measuring 1 1/4 by 4 3/4. I'm going to place this on the 4 3/4 inch side and score this at 1/2 inch on the bottom. I'm going to fold on that score line and burnish. Then I have a piece that measures 1 1/4 by 6 inches. I'm going to place the 6 inch side on the scoreboard and score this at the top at 1/2 inch. Then I'll burnish this down. And we have our bottom and our top pieces that we're going to use to form a band, and then we're going to put a band here that this will tuck down into. So first, I'm going to adhere these to the center of my page. So I need to mark this first. So I'm going to mark it at 5/8 around my center. And if you are using a regular ruler, you need to come over 2 1/2 inches from each end. We'll do the same thing on the top. Marking that first. Now I'm going to take the 1 1/4 by 4 3/4 inch piece, add my adhesive, and apply this down here at the bottom so that the score line lines up with the bottom edge of my page. Then I'm going to take my longer of the 2 pieces, add my adhesive to my tab, and line up the score line with the top edge of the page, and then also making sure that this is straight and lined up with the band that we just put on at the bottom when we burnish this down. So mine's actually just slightly off at the top, but I want to make sure that it is straight down here because this piece needs to be able to tuck into the part we're going to put on here. So next I have a piece that measures 3/4 by 2.5, and we're going to create a piece to wrap around. So I'm just going to place this here, and I'm going to mark where that piece is on my paper, and I am going to score this just a little bit more on both sides. So I'm not using a full 1/8 of an inch. I'm just kind of going with what is on my paper itself. Then I'm going to fold this around. And place this here. Now I need to make sure that if this is on here, this will slide in pretty easily. You'll see that there is a little bit of wiggle room there, and that's what I want. So then I need to make sure that I place this in the correct position. So I'm going to be putting this, I think I might actually just make it easy on myself and put this just slightly down. If it's just slightly down, this will slide in there easier than if it's like this. It's hard sometimes to find that opening. So just about 1/8 of an inch past the top of that. So what I'm going to do is add my adhesive here to these little flaps. I'm going to place this down, and then I'm going to fold this and fold this. And then I'll burnish this here. This is going to be covered up with decorative paper, so you won't see it anyway. I am going to erase my measurement so that that's not visible. Need to do the same thing here. So now I have my little band part here for this to tuck in and close. Now, if you don't like this, you can also just put a magnet here, but I'm going to do this and leave that as the front of my page. We're going to next come into the inside of page 1 and start decorating that. Before we move on to the inside, I'm going to come back and cut a piece to 8.5 by 4 3/4, and then on the 8.5 inch side, we're going to score at 4 1/4. And then we're going to fold on this score line and burnish to make a little card or a booklet. And this booklet is going to go here in this pocket. So you can place it this orientation or this orientation, whichever you prefer. And I think I'm going to place mine here, but not place it all the way down in my pocket. Then I'm going to close this back up. And now I'm going to move on to this inside section. I have one piece that's 4 3/4 by 6 1/4. I'm going to score this along the 4 3/4 inch side at 1/2 inch. And this is going to be on the left hand side. So I'm going to fold on this score line, burnish this fold, and then I'm going to put this sideways so it's a little bit easier for me to see. I'm going to be adhering this piece down here to my paper in the center. So I'm going to mark this, if you're using a centering ruler, 3 1/8. If you are not, you're going to measure this at 1 inch from top and bottom. Then we're going to add the adhesive to this 1/2 inch tab section here. And then I'm going to be lining up that score line right on the edge of the page, and then lining it up between those two marks that I made so it's centered. And now we have a flap on the inside of our page, and I'm just going to leave this like this. Very simple on the inside, just one interactive element. So that's it for the front of page 1. Now I'm going to bring in the back of page 1. I'm going to flip this over. We're going to work on the inside first. I have a piece that measures 2 inches by 8 1/4 inches. This is going to be a belly band here for the center of the page, but I'm not going to be placing this paper on until after I have my decorative paper on first. Then I'll place this down, then I'll place decorative paper on here. Now the reason I'm doing that is because I want this belly band to be tight so that the photo mount that I place in here doesn't move around a lot. If there was that 1/2 inch tab, it lifts it up, it gives it a lot more room to move. So I'm just going to leave this here for now. And then I've cut a second piece that measures 4 1/2 by 7 1/2. This is going to be my photo mat for under my belly band. So I'm going to leave both of these pieces here, and I am just going to be taping these with some washi tape. Washi is removable, so it won't stay on there permanently, but this will hold these to my page for now until I go to decorate. So I'm going to flip back here now and work on the outside back of page 1. The first piece we'll cut for the back is 3 inches by 8 1/4 inches. On the 3 inch side, we're going to score this at 1/2 inch on the right hand side. I'm going to miter these corners and then fold on the score line. This is going to go here on the right side of the page. So I'm going to add my adhesive first to my 1/2 inch tab section. And I will line up my score line with the edge of this page. Now I'm going to write on here, pocket. This is a note to me to turn this into a pocket. So if you followed any of my tutorials in the past, you know that I like to leave myself little notes so that I remember what I was doing. So this next piece, it measures 8 1/2 by 4 1/2. On the left-hand side, on the 8 1/2 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch. This is going to be a flap for down here. And let me see how big I want this to be. So I think I'm going to score this. So I have it here at 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to score this at 5 3/4 inches. I'm going to fold back on this score line. And then I'm going to fold opposite direction on the second score line. So that way, when I put this on here, there's going to basically be 2 pockets on this page because we're going to turn this into a pocket as well. So I'm first going to add my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab section. And then I'm going to use my ruler just so that I can place this. And I'm going to place this 1/2 inch from the bottom edge. And just like on the other side, we're going to line up the score line with the edge of that page and then burnish this down. And then for this one, I'm going to write myself a note again that says pocket. And then I have 2 pieces for photo mat. So the first one is 4 1/4 by 7 1/4. It will be the photo mat for this larger pocket. Then I have a piece that's 3 3/4 by 4 1/4. It will be the photo mat for the smaller pocket. For right now, I'm just going to put both of them tucked under here, and I'll take a piece of washi just to keep them in place so that they don't fall out. So now we have the inside and the outside. So this will be the first page for the album. Next, we're going to begin building up page 2 front. So I have my base page in here first, and I have 1 piece of cardstock that measures 4 1/2 by 11 inches. Now on the right hand side, I marked this at 2 1/4 inches, right in the halfway point, because we're going to need that in just a minute. On the 11-inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch on the left side. Then you can either use your paper trimmer or you can use a pair of scissors if you don't feel comfortable doing this. I'm going to be taking my paper from that 1/2 inch mark that I made up to my score line. I'm measuring from my score line here at 1/2 inch, and I'm going to be cutting this paper like this. So I'm doing a diagonal pocket, but I need this 1/2 inch tab to still be on my page. So now that this is lined up, I've got it at 11. I've already scored it at 1/2 inch. I'm going to come over here and score at 6 3/4 inches. I'm going to miter both corners on my tab first, and then I'm going to fold in on my tab section and burnish. And then I'll be folding back on the second fold. So I have a zigzag fold here that's going to be like this. So I will have a pocket here and I'll have a pocket here. So I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it to the back of the 1/2 inch tab section. And I'm going to line this piece up at the bottom, along the bottom edge and the score line with the the edge of the paper. Then I'm going to burnish this down. Everything should be straight. So both score lines should be on the edges of the paper, and this should be straight across here. So for now, I'm going to leave this like this. I'm going to make myself a note. That's going to be a pocket. Once my decorative paper is put on, I would adhere that down and I would adhere this down. Same thing with this. So I'm going to put a note here that this will also be a small pocket. Next, I've cut one piece to 4 inches by 6 3/4. I've marked down from the top left corner 1 1/4 inches. On the 6 3/4 inch side, I'm going to score this at 1/2 inch. And then on the bottom, on the 4 inch side, I'm also going to score this at 1/2 inch. Next, I'm going to take this to my paper trimmer, just like we did with the previous cut. I have the trimmer lined up with the 1/2 inch score line and that mark at 1 1/4 inches. So I'm not going all the way to the end of my piece. I'm going 1/2 inch in where that score line starts. And I'm going to cut my piece off to create another diagonal pocket. Then I'm going to miter these corners. And next, I'm going to fold on these score lines to create my upper pocket for my page. This pocket is going to go here. And I need to make sure that this pocket will fit here on the edge with this closed. So it actually pushes my pocket out a little bit. So it's actually just a little bit too large. So I'm going to trim off of the short end just a little tiny piece so that this will fit on my page. Because of all these folds and these score lines, it adds a little bit of bulk to the paper. So one easy way to make sure you get the right size is to start with it being just a little bit too large and trimming it to fit on your page. So I'm going to be placing this here where this overlaps just slightly. And mine is 1 3/4 inches from the top of my page. So that's where I'm going to adhere this. Adding my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab sections to create this pocket. I don't have to worry about the other side because that is going to go right into the side of my page. So I'll apply this down first, close my page, and then make sure everything, you see there's just that tiny overlap there. Make sure everything is lined up. And now I'll burnish this down to my page. So now we will have a pocket here. We'll adhere this down later. We'll adhere this down later and this down later. So we've got 1, 2, 3 pockets, and we'll make some photo mats for these pockets. The first photo mat is 3 3/4 by 4 1/4. That's going to go in this pocket. The second one is 3.5 by 6 3/4. It's going to go here in this pocket. And the third one is 4 1/4 by 4, and it's going to go up here in this top pocket. For right now, I'm going to place them here. Now this one will be sticking out, but that's okay. And I'm going to flip over it, and we're going to add our element on the inside of the page. For the inside, I have 2 pieces that measure 4 1/4 by 3 3/4. I'm going to use a piercing tool. On this first piece, I'm going to be measuring over 1/4 inch from the right bottom corner, and then I'm going to be measuring up 1/4 inch from the bottom, and then I'm going to pierce a hole down through my paper. For now, I'm just going to take a brad and insert those prongs to the back side and open them up to secure this to my piece. And on the second one, I'm going to measure over 1/4 inch from the top right and down 1/4 inch from the top right corner. I'm going to pierce my hole, and then I'm going to place another brad down through that hole and secure those prongs on the back side. Once we have paper here, we're going to adhere these as swiveling flaps on the page. So for right now, I'm just going to take some washi and adhere these to the back side of my page. And then that is the front and inside of page 1. So next we're going to move on to the back side, but we're going to do the inside first. It's going to be a simple flap. So we've got a piece that measures 5 inches by 6 3/4 inch. On the 6 3/4 inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch on the right and fold and burnish on the score line. Next, I'm going to use my ruler to mark the center here. So that's going to be, if you're using a centering ruler like me, at 2.5 inches from center. If you're using a regular ruler, it's going to be, it's not an exact measurement here, so about 1 and just almost 1 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to add my adhesive here to my 1/2 inch tab section and adhere this right to the center of my page, making sure that the score line is lined up with the edge of the page. And this is all I'm going to be placing on the inside of this page. So next we'll move on to the back of page 2. The first flap, we're going to cut 5.5 by 8 inches. On the 8 inch side, we're going to be scoring this at 1/2 inch on the top. And we're going to fold on the score line and burnish. And this is going to go here on the top of the page in the center. So I'm going to use my centering ruler and mark this. So it's going to be at 2 3/4 of an inch. Or if you are using a regular ruler, it's going to be 3/8 of an inch over from each side. So I'm going to add my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab section first. And then I'm going to adhere this to the top so that my score line is lined up with the edge of my page. Next, we need a piece that measures 5.5 by 5 inches. On the 5.5 inch side, we are going to score this, or on the 5 inch side, I'm sorry. On the 5 inch side, we need to score at 1/2 an inch. And then we're going to fold on the score line. And I'm actually going to unfold this and miter these corners on this flap. Then I'll refold this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to adhere this flap to the top of the larger flap. So I'm going to add my adhesive here to my 1/2 inch tab section first. Then I'm going to line up this score line with the edge of the paper and stack it on top of the other score line on the first flap. Next, I have a piece that measures 4 inches by 6.5 inches. On the 6.5 inch side, I'm going to score at 1/2 inch and 6 inches. Then I'm going to turn, and on the 4 inch side, I'm going to score at 1/2 inch on the bottom. And then I'm going to miter my corners so that when this is folded, this pocket will lay flatter because it won't have that excess in the corner. So I'm going to take my tabs, fold back on my score lines, and burnish to flatten this. And then I'm going to take my pocket and I'm going to adhere it to the bottom of my larger flap. So I need to add my adhesive to all 3 of these 1/2 inch tab sections on my pocket first. And then I'm going to line up the bottom edge and the sides so that they are straight. And I'm going to do this upside down so it's easier for me to work with and see on camera. So making sure that that bottom edge is lined up, and then that should make those sides line up perfectly as well. I like to start in the center of my pocket and press outward because that will make sure that it's nice and flat and doesn't bubble up or move off of the page. So now I have my pocket here and I have my flap, and then I have the larger flap. I'm going to turn this into like an envelope style with another little closure like the first page. So I have a piece that's 1 1/4 by 3 inches. It's going to be a band that's going to go down here on the bottom. I also have a piece that measures 2.5 by 3/4 of an inch. It's going to tuck in here. So I'm going to position this first where I want it to be, where there's just going to be a little tiny bit sticking underneath. So it's going to be right about there. I'm going to draw a line here where that piece is. And I'm going to draw a line here where I know where everything goes, and I'm going to line this up this way. But I'm going to make sure it's centered first. So I need to bring in my ruler. And my piece was pretty centered where I actually had it. So then I'm going to add my adhesive to this piece. And then I'm going to apply mine is going to be about 3/8 of an inch on the front flap. And then I'm going to take this and just like we did on the previous one, I'm going to stick this on here. And I'm going to mark where the edges of the paper are. And then on my scoreboard, I'm going to take this and score just slightly past on both sides. And then I'm going to fold this down. And again, it should be larger than my piece so that it will move in and out of there. And this is going to go here, but I'm not going to adhere this down yet because I'm going to place my decorative paper. Then I'm going to place this down. So I'm going to take a piece of washi for now and add this right here to my page with this here. Next, I have a piece that's cut to 8.5 by 5.5. I'm going to place the 8.5 inch side up against the scoreboard and score at 4 1/4 inches. Then I'm going to fold this and burnish my fold to make my card or my booklet. And this is going to be for in here in my pocket. So we've got our pocket here, and then we've got our large flap here, and this page is finished. So we've got our inside and our outside for the back page to go with our inside and outside for the front page for page 2. So now we're completely finished with page 2, and we're finished with this video for now. So don't forget to stay tuned for the next part of the tutorial where we will start building page 3. And if you're just joining in, don't forget to check out the links in the description box below for all of the papers that you can find on the Scrap and Create website.